Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the marble halls of ancient Rome, where 6 women held the fate of an empire in their trembling hands. Picture yourself walking through the Roman Forum at dawn, mist rising from the cobblestones, as you approach a circular temple, unlike any other. Inside, a sacred flame flickers, never extinguished for over 1,000 years. The women tending this fire aren't ordinary priestesses. They're the Vestal Virgins, and their story will probably make you grateful you weren't born into Roman nobility. You probably won't survive the selection process alone. Imagine being chosen at 6 years old to surrender your entire future, your family, your chance at love and children, all for the honor of keeping a fire lit. But somehow, these extraordinary women not only survived, they wielded power that would make modern CEOs envious. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is in your world. I love seeing how this ancient story connects us across time zones. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing before the Temple of Vesta as the first rays of sunlight pierce the Roman Forum. The circular building rises before you like a miniature cosmos, its 20 Corinthian columns supporting a domed roof with an opening at its center. Smoke drifts upward in a steady stream, the only visible sign of the eternal flame burning within. This isn't just any fire. According to Roman belief, this flame carries the very essence of Rome's survival, brought from the ashes of Troy by Aeneas himself. The temple's design speaks to something primal in human nature, the circular hearth that has anchored communities since our ancestors first gathered around fires in caves. But here, in the heart of the world's greatest empire, that ancient symbol has been elevated to divine status. Archaeological evidence shows the first permanent structures, connected to Vesta's worship, existed as early as the 6th century BCE, making this one of Rome's oldest religious institutions. As you circle the temple, you notice its unusual accessibility. Unlike other Roman temples with their imposing steps and restricted access, this sacred space connects directly to the Forum's daily life. Vesta's temple was essentially the temple of all Rome and its citizens. It was open all day. By night it was closed to men. The symbolism is unmistakable. This goddess belongs to everyone, yet her most intimate mysteries remain guarded by women alone. The morning air carries the scent of burning wood and frankincense, mixed with the more earthly aromas of the awakening city. Fresh bread from nearby bakeries, the metallic tang of fountain water, and that distinctly Roman blend of marble dust and olive oil. But there's something else. Something indefinable that makes the hair on your arms stand up. It's the weight of centuries, the accumulated prayers and fears of millions who believe their very existence depended on this flickering flame. Historians still argue whether the eternal flame tradition originated with the Etruscans or represents an even older Indo-European custom. But one thing remains certain. By the time Rome rose to power, this fire had become the spiritual heartbeat of the empire. When it burned bright, Rome prospered. When it flickered, citizens trembled. The selection of a Vestal Virgin begins not with grand ceremony, but with a list. You're watching as the Pontifex Maximus, Rome's chief priest, reviews parchments bearing the names of 20 young girls, each between 6 and 10 years old. The requirements are exacting, almost cruel in their precision. A girl had to be free of any bodily defect, both physical or mental, have 2 living parents, and be a daughter of a freeborn resident of Rome. Picture little Claudia, age 7, standing in her family's atrium as officials examine her like a prized heifer. They check her teeth, her posture, listen to her speak to ensure no impediments mar her voice. Her parents hover nearby, proud yet terrified. Being selected means honor beyond measure, but it also means losing their daughter forever. No grandchildren from this bloodline, no marriage alliances to strengthen their political position. The emotional weight of this moment would crush modern sensibilities. These are children being asked to make a commitment they can't possibly understand. A 6-year-old knows nothing of sexual desire, nothing of the maternal yearning that might consume her at 25, nothing of the loneliness that will define her existence. Once selected, the virginal girl went through the performance of the captio, a ceremonial initiation in which she was ritually taken by the pontifex from her home and forevermore removed from all legal ties to her family and male guardianship. The word captio shares its root with capture. There's no gentle euphemism here. These girls are being seized for the state. You witness the ceremony itself in the pre-dawn darkness. The chosen child, dressed in white linen, stands trembling as the Pontifex Maximus speaks the ancient formula. I take you, a martyr, to be a Vestal Virgin, who will duly perform the sacred rites, which it is the duty of a Vestal Virgin to perform for the Roman people, on the same terms as she who was taken before was taken. The language deliberately echoes marriage vows, because, in a sense, that's exactly what this is, a marriage to Rome itself. The girl's mother weeps silently. Roman stoicism demands restraint, but what mother's heart wouldn't shatter, watching her child disappear into a life she can barely comprehend? The father maintains his dignity, but you can see the question in his eyes. Have they honored their daughter or sacrificed her? As dawn breaks, the procession moves toward the forum. The new Vestal walks behind the Pontifex, her small feet barely making sound on the worn stones. Citizens wake to witness this transfer of a child from private family to public service. Some throw flower petals, others make the sign against evil, because there's something unsettling about seeing childhood innocence claimed by ancient ritual. The most heartbreaking detail? The privilege of this guaranteeing that both the girl and her parents were honorable meant that wealthy families competed for this honor, even knowing its cost. In Rome's social hierarchy, having a daughter serve as a Vestal brought such prestige that parents willingly traded their child's future happiness for political advancement. Historians still argue whether these young girls truly understood their fate or were simply swept along by family ambition and religious tradition. But as you watch 7-year-old Claudia disappear into the house of the Vestals, one thing becomes clear. Childhood as we understand it has just ended forever. Your 30 years as a Vestal unfold like a carefully choreographed dance between learning, performing, and teaching. The 30 years was divided into 3 10-year periods. During the first 10 years, a Vestal was an apprentice learning the rituals. During the second 10 years, you were expected to perform the duties you learned. And during the final 10 years, you served as a mentor to the new Vestals. Picture yourself at age 8, following 16-year-old Quinta through the pre-dawn corridors of the House of the Vestals. Your bare feet slap softly against the cold marble as she whispers instructions. Always approach the flame from the east. Never let your shadow fall across the sacred brazier. If the fire dims, add only olive wood. Never oak, never pine. These aren't just rules. They're the accumulated wisdom of 1,000 years, passed from woman to woman in an unbroken chain. The learning phase feels endless. Your small hands struggle to weave the sacred woolen bands. Your young voice cracks attempting the ancient hymns. You memorize the properties of different grains for the mola salsa, learning to distinguish between the ritual salt from the sacred spring and ordinary table salt by taste alone. The older Vestals watch your every movement, correcting your posture during prayers, adjusting your hand position as you tend the flame. Sometimes you cry from homesickness, missing your mother's embrace or your sister's laughter. But crying is discouraged. You are Rome's daughter now, and Rome demands strength. The other novices become your family, sharing whispered conversations in the dormitories, comparing notes about which senior Vestals are kindest, which rituals are hardest to master. By your second decade, everything changes. You're no longer the stumbling child, but the confident performer. Your hands move with practiced grace as you prepare the daily offerings. You understand the weight of responsibility settling on your shoulders. The fate of Rome literally rests in your ability to keep that flame burning. During the second 10 years, you were expected to perform the duties you learned with the precision of a master craftsman. This is when the isolation hits hardest. You're now 18, 20, 25. Ages when other Roman women are marrying, bearing children, running households. You watch from your sacred precinct as your childhood friends navigate motherhood, while you remain forever suspended in ritual virginity. The irony cuts deep. You're responsible for the fertility and continuation of Rome, yet you're forbidden from participating in the most fundamental human experiences of creation and family. Your final decade brings the bittersweet role of teacher. During a final 10 years training new Vestals, you see yourself reflected in those frightened 6-year-old faces. You become the whispered voice in the darkness, the gentle hand correcting their mistakes, the bridge between their lost childhood and their sacred purpose. But there's something profound in this mentorship. You're not just teaching ritual, you're preserving feminine wisdom in a male-dominated world. The knowledge of herbs, the understanding of seasonal cycles, the emotional intelligence required to guide scared children, these skills create a parallel power structure within Roman society. Historians still argue whether the 30-year commitment was designed to encompass a woman's entire fertile period, or simply represented a mystical number sacred to Vesta. But watching yourself progress from child to novice to master to teacher, you understand the psychological genius of this system. By the time you're free to leave, the Vestal life is all you've ever known. The outside world has become foreign territory. The selection ritual unfolds with the gravity of choosing an emperor. You're standing in the Regia, the official residence of the Pontifex Maximus, as Rome's most powerful religious figure, prepares to select the next guardian of the eternal flame. During the Republican period, the Pontifex Maximus, the high priest of Rome, would select who would serve as a Vestal by choosing a name at random from a list of 20. 20 names, 20 families holding their breath across the 7 hills of Rome. You can feel the tension crackling through the air like lightning before a storm. These aren't random children. Each represents the cream of Roman nobility. Their bloodlines trace back generations to ensure proper breeding and character. The political implications are staggering. Gaining a daughter selected as a Vestal could elevate a family's standing for generations. Picture the scene. 20 sets of parents waiting in their homes, some praying to household gods for selection, others secretly hoping their daughters will be passed over. The cognitive dissonance is uniquely Roman, this honor that everyone covets, but no parent truly wants for their child. It's like winning a lottery that costs you everything you love. The Pontifex Maximus approaches a bronze urn containing 20 ivory tablets, each inscribed with a girl's name. His hands, aged by decades of ritual, reach into the vessel, while onlookers hold their breath. The randomness is crucial. It removes human bias and places the selection in the hands of the gods themselves. Or so the Romans tell themselves. But there's nothing random about the preparation. For months, families have been positioning themselves, ensuring their daughters meet every requirement. The candidates had to be free of physical and mental defects, but the definition of defect could be remarkably flexible when political considerations entered the picture. A slight lisp might disqualify a girl from a family that had fallen from favor, while the same speech impediment might be overlooked for the daughter of a useful senator. You watch as the selected name is announced. Caecilia Maxima, daughter of Gaius Caecilius Metellus. The messenger races through Rome's winding streets to deliver the news. At the Metellus house, you witness the complex emotions washing over faces: pride, terror, grief, and excitement warring for dominance. 7-year-old Caecilia doesn't understand why everyone is crying while calling her blessed. The rejected families experience their own complicated relief. Their daughters remain their own, free to marry and bear grandchildren, but they've also lost their chance at the ultimate social elevation. In Rome's honor-based society, being overlooked for Vestal selection could sting for generations. The timing of selections reveals another layer of political calculation. Historians still argue whether pontiffs deliberately chose girls from families that needed binding closer to the current regime, or specifically selected from neutral houses to avoid accusations of favoritism. Either way, the selection process doubled as a tool of statecraft, weaving religious authority into the complex web of Roman politics. Within hours of selection, little Caecilia's life transforms completely. Slave girls pack her belongings, though she'll keep almost nothing from her previous existence. New clothes await her, the distinctive white robes and fillets that mark her as set apart from ordinary women. Tomorrow she'll wake up in the house of the Vestals, and tonight will be her last as her father's daughter. The cruelest aspect? These 6-year-olds have no voice in their fate. They're poker chips in a game played by gods and mortals, valuable precisely because of their innocence and powerlessness. Yet somehow, from this system of ritual childhood sacrifice, some of Rome's most influential women would emerge. The sacred training begins before dawn in chambers ordinary Romans never see. You follow your mentors through corridors lined with marble statues of former Vestals, their cold eyes seeming to watch your every stumbling step. The mysteries you're learning aren't written in any book. They exist only in the whispered transmission from one generation of priestesses to the next. The 3 senior Vestals parched the grain to make it edible, and mixed it with salt to make the mola salsa used by priests and priestesses to consecrate the animal victims offered in public sacrifices. This sounds simple until you experience the complexity. The grain must be harvested by Vestals themselves, using bronze knives during specific festivals. The salt comes only from sacred springs, collected in ritual vessels that haven't touched common earth. Watch as Quinta demonstrates the proper technique. Feel the grain between your fingers. It should sound like whispered prayers when it's ready for parching. Too long in the fire and it becomes bitter. Too little and the gods reject the offering. Your young hands struggle with the bronze sieve, the ancient tool heavy and unwieldy. The older Vestal guides your movements with infinite patience, understanding that Rome's spiritual welfare depends on perfecting these seemingly mundane tasks. But the mola salsa represents only the visible surface of Vestal knowledge. You're gradually introduced to the mysteries of the Pinus Vesti, the sacred storehouse that even most Romans know nothing about. One of the most mysterious of these was their custodianship of the storeroom known as the Penus Vestae, a sacred, symbolic space whose secret contents relating to Rome's distant mythological origins were unknown even to most Romans. Picture yourself at age 12, finally deemed worthy to enter this inner sanctum. The heavy door swings open on bronze hinges, revealing a chamber that feels older than the city itself. Here, in cedar chests lined with purple silk, rest artifacts that supposedly trace back to Troy's destruction. Your breath catches as you glimpse objects whose very existence is Rome's most closely guarded secret. The sacred fire itself demands its own specialized knowledge. Every morning, one Vestal checked the fuel, added wood or oil, and burned incense. Another Vestal fetched holy water from the spring of the Aquae Vestae for rituals. But choosing the correct wood requires understanding gathered over generations. Olive wood burns clean and steady, perfect for maintaining the flame. Oak burns too hot and can crack the sacred brazier. Applewood creates the sweetest smoke for evening offerings. You learn to read the flame's moods like a mother reads her child's face. A steady golden glow means the gods are pleased. Blue flickers suggest coming storms. If the flame begins to smoke heavily, political turmoil threatens Rome. The fire becomes your oracle, your constant companion, your most demanding teacher. The water ritual proves equally complex. Vesta would have no water from the city water supply system. It must come from sacred springs using vessels that have never held common water. You trek to the Aqua Vesti spring before dawn, carrying an amphora blessed by centuries of ritual use. The water tastes different, somehow purer, almost effervescent on your tongue. Historians still argue whether these elaborate procedures served practical purposes or purely spiritual ones, but experiencing them firsthand reveals their psychological power. Every gesture, every measurement, every moment of preparation reinforces your separation from ordinary existence. You're not just learning rituals, you're being transformed into something beyond human, a living bridge between mortals and immortals. The knowledge weighs on you like armor. By adolescence, you understand secrets that could topple governments, religious mysteries that predate Rome's founding, agricultural wisdom that ensures the city's food supply. Yet you're forbidden from sharing this knowledge with anyone outside your sacred sisterhood. The loneliness of being Rome's most informed women, yet unable to speak freely, becomes another burden to bear. The privileges of a Vestal Virgin read like a fantasy of feminine power in the ancient world. They could own property, vote, and write a will. They had the best seats at public games, and they even had the power to free condemned prisoners and slaves. A condemned man on his way to his execution only had to catch a glimpse of a Vestal Virgin to be freed. Picture yourself at age 25, walking through Rome's streets in your distinctive white robes and unique headdress. Crowds part before you like water before a ship's prow. Men remove their caps. Women bow their heads in respect. Your lictor, your personal bodyguard, clears the path ahead, announcing your approach with the ceremonial rods and axe that normally accompany only the highest magistrates. A Vestal was inviolate and not to be touched by the impure masses. To further protect them, a Vestal had a lictor, bodyguard, to guard them in public and would ride in a carpentum, carriage, which carried them through the streets. This isn't mere ceremony, it's practical power. While other Roman women depend entirely on male relatives for protection and status, you command respect through your own sacred authority. The financial independence proves even more revolutionary. Unlike other women, Licinia could own property precisely because she was a Vestal Virgin. You can buy land, invest in trading ventures, lend money at interest, activities that would be impossible for any other woman in Roman society. Some Vestals become among the empire's wealthiest individuals. Their shrewd investments, building fortunes that would make modern hedge fund managers envious. Consider the story of Marcus Licinius Crassus, one of Rome's richest men, who was accused of inappropriate relations with the Vestal Licinia. As the first-century historian Plutarch recounts, Licinia was the owner of a pleasant villa in the suburbs which Crassus wished to get at a low price, and it was for this reason that he was forever hovering about the woman and paying his court to her. The trial revealed that Crassus wasn't interested in romance. He wanted her real estate portfolio. Your power to pardon condemned criminals creates moments of profound drama. Imagine walking through the forum when your path crosses a procession leading a condemned man to execution. Roman law states that if this meeting appears accidental, not prearranged, you can free him with a word. They could free condemned prisoners and slaves by touching them. If a person who was sentenced to death met a Vestal Virgin on his way to the execution, he was automatically pardoned. The psychological weight of this privilege astounds you. One moment you're thinking about evening prayers, the next you're literally holding a stranger's life in your hands. The condemned man falls to his knees, tears streaming down his face begging for mercy. The crowd holds its breath. Your decision will either send him to death or grant him a second chance at life. The gods have placed you at this crossroads, but the choice remains terrifyingly human. At public games, you occupy the seats of honor, positioned where emperors and senators can see you. Augustus granted the Vestals the supreme honor as the only women to sit right at the front of the theater and gladiatorial contests. Your presence legitimizes the violence, your sacred approval transforming brutal entertainment into religious ritual. When gladiators salute before combat, they're not just acknowledging the emperor, they're seeking blessing from Rome's holiest women. But the most intoxicating privilege proves to be your legal independence. They were allowed to make a will without the oversight of a male guardian, a privilege that was denied to most women, who had to remain under the legal control of their fathers or husbands. Even imperial women require male consent for major financial decisions. But you answer to no man except the Pontifex Maximus in religious matters. Historians still argue whether these privileges compensated for a Vestal's sacrifices or simply made her isolation more bearable. But watching other women struggle under legal and financial restrictions while you move freely through Roman society, one truth becomes clear. The price of feminine power in ancient Rome was the surrender of feminine experience itself. The eternal flame burns in a bronze brazier at the temple's heart, and your entire existence revolves around its hungry demands. The primary duty of the Vestal Virgins was to maintain the sacred flame within the Temple of Vesta. They ensured this symbol of the eternal vitality of Rome, believed to be tied to the city's fortune, never extinguished. Picture yourself on dawn watch, approaching the sacred fire as the first light filters through the temple's opening. The flame dances in its bronze container, about 3 feet high and elaborately decorated with scenes of Vesta's myths. Its light reflects off the polished marble walls, creating shadows that seem to move with lives of their own. This isn't just fire, it's the beating heart of an empire. The responsibility crushes you with its weight. It was believed if the sacred flame of Vesta went out, that the city of Rome would fall. So every moment of inattention, every second of drowsiness during night watches, could theoretically doom millions of people. You check the fuel level obsessively, your hand shaking slightly as you add precisely measured amounts of olive oil. Too much, and the flame flares dangerously. Too little, and it might gutter out. The fire demands constant feeding, but refuses common materials. Only specific woods burn acceptably: olive for its clean flame, laurel for festivals, apple for evening offerings. You learn to read the quality of wood by touch, rejecting pieces that feel too green or too dry. The flame has moods, sometimes burning bright and cheerful, other times sullen and smoky, as if reflecting Rome's political climate. Night watches prove the most challenging. You sit alone in the circular temple, watching shadows dance across ancient walls while the city sleeps. The silence feels oppressive, broken only by the soft whisper of burning wood and the distant sound of fountain water. Your fellow Vestals take turns through the dark hours, but each woman faces the flame's demands alone. Extinction of Vesta's sacred fire through Vestal negligence could be expiated by the scourging or beating of the offender, carried out in the dark and through a curtain to preserve their modesty. This punishment haunts your dreams. The Pontifex Maximus strips you naked, but ensures your dignity through darkness and veils while the whip falls. The physical pain would heal, but the shame of failing Rome might never fade. Consider the technique required just for relighting. If the flame dies through negligence, it cannot be rekindled with common fire. You must create new flame through the ancient friction method, rubbing specific woods together until sparks catch the prepared tinder. Your hands blister from the effort, your arms ache from the repetitive motion, but the gods accept only fire born from pure materials through ritual labor. The flame's renewal ceremony occurs annually on the March calends. Each year, the eternal flame was renewed on the March calends. If the fire was extinguished for any reason at any other time, it was a harbinger of trouble for the city. You participate in the elaborate ritual of safely transferring the old flame to temporary vessels, while priests clean the sacred brazier and perform purification rites. The psychological pressure proves almost unbearable. Romans scrutinize every flicker for omens. If the flame burns blue, they whisper about coming military defeats. If it smokes heavily, they blame the Vestals for some hidden impurity. You become a living barometer of divine favor, your competence in fire tending literally interpreted as Rome's spiritual health. But there's something mystical about this constant vigil. After years of tending the flame, you develop an almost supernatural connection to its rhythms. You wait before dawn, not because of duty, but because the fire calls you. You sense its needs before approaching the temple. The boundary between your identity and your sacred charge begins to blur. Historians still argue whether the eternal flame tradition preserved some practical purpose, perhaps maintaining a reliable fire source before easy ignition methods, or served purely symbolic functions. But sitting alone in the temple at midnight, watching flames, that have burned continuously for centuries, you understand that some mysteries transcend rational explanation. Romans didn't just respect the Vestal Virgins, they feared them with the kind of awe reserved for living goddesses. Romans regarded these priestesses with a sense of awe. Plutarch points out, they were also keepers of other divine secrets, concealed from all but themselves. It was believed they possessed magical powers. Picture yourself walking through the Suburra, Rome's most crowded district, when a fight breaks out between rival gangs. Knives flash in the afternoon sun, blood spatters the cobblestones, and the crowd surges backward in panic. Then, someone spots your white robes and sacred headdress. Vestal. The word ripples through the mob like a prayer. Men drop their weapons. The violence simply stops, as if your presence has cast a spell over human aggression. This isn't mere respect, it's supernatural terror. Vestals, it was said, could stop a runaway slave in his tracks. Romans believe your virginity grants you powers that transcend normal human limitations. You've heard the stories whispered in marketplaces. A Vestal's curse can strike down enemies. Her blessing can heal the sick. Her very gaze can compel truth from liars. The most dramatic manifestation of your supposed powers involves the condemned criminals. They could pardon condemned prisoners and safeguarded the wills of influential political figures such as Mark Antony and Julius Caesar. But beyond legal pardons, Romans believe accidental encounters with Vestals work actual miracles. You've witnessed men on their way to execution fall to their knees upon seeing you, tears streaming down their faces as they beg for the divine intervention your presence might provide. Consider the famous case of Claudia Quinta during the Second Punic War. She was accused of unchastity and brought before the Pontifex Maximus for trial. However, Claudia maintained her innocence and proclaimed that she was a faithful servant of the goddess Vesta and prayed to her for help. The next day, a ship carrying a statue of the goddess Cybele became stuck in the Tiber River. Despite the efforts of the crew and the citizens of Rome, the ship refused to budge. Claudia was then summoned to the river and, with the help of Vesta, was able to move the ship single-handedly. The psychological impact on you proves overwhelming. How do you live with the constant expectation of miracles? Every gesture becomes fraught with meaning. If you touch a sick child and they recover, you're credited with divine healing. If you touch them and they die, whispers follow about your hidden impurity. The burden of others' desperate faith weighs heavier than any ritual obligation. Your sisters report similar experiences. Tucha, accused of breaking her vow, proved her innocence by carrying water in a sieve. This apparent miracle saved her life. Whether divine intervention or clever stagecraft, such demonstrations reinforce the public's belief in Vestal supernatural powers. The line between religious theatre and genuine miracle becomes impossibly blurred. But the power cuts both ways. If Romans believe you can work miracles when pure, they also believe your hidden corruption can doom the city. Every military defeat, every plague outbreak, every political crisis triggers suspicious glances toward the house of the Vestals. Your supernatural status makes you a convenient scapegoat when divine favor appears to wane. The isolation intensifies under such scrutiny. Normal human relationships become impossible when people either worship you as a living goddess or fear you as a potential bringer of catastrophe. Friends approach you with desperate requests for intercession. Strangers prostrate themselves in your path. Even senators and generals treat you with nervous deference, uncertain whether you might curse their enterprises. Living under such expectations changes you profoundly. You begin to wonder if the powers are real, if decades of ritual purity have actually transformed you into something beyond mortal. When your intuition proves unusually accurate, when your presence coincidentally prevents disasters, when your words carry unexpected weight, are these signs of divine favor or simply the placebo effect of others' faith? Historians still argue whether Vestal miracles represented genuine religious experiences, psychological manipulation, or simple coincidence enhanced by selective memory. But experiencing life as a living symbol of divine power, you understand that the truth matters less than the crushing weight of supernatural expectations. The vow of perpetual chastity burns through your existence like a slow poison, most acutely felt during the decades when your body screams for experiences you can never have. The inviolability of Vestals was predicated on their virginity. It was this sexual status that entirely defined their social powers. The control of their sexuality was synonymous with the welfare and politics of the state. Picture yourself at 23, watching from your privileged seat as gladiators battle in the Colosseum. The crowd roars with bloodlust, but your attention fixes on a young senator sitting nearby. His eyes meet yours across the marble barrier, and for one forbidden moment, you imagine what it might feel like to touch another human being with desire rather than ritual obligation. The thought terrifies and thrills you in equal measure. Your body betrays you daily with reminders of what you've sacrificed. Monthly cycles arrive with cramping regularity, your womb preparing for children who will never exist. You watch pregnant women in the forum with a hunger that feels almost cannibalistic, craving not just sexual connection, but the fundamental human experience of creating life. The irony cuts deep. You're responsible for Rome's fertility while being forbidden from participating in it. The isolation extends beyond sexual desire to emotional intimacy. Roman women your age share the trials of marriage, the joys and sorrows of motherhood, the complex negotiations of household management. Their conversations center on topics you can never understand: difficult husbands, colicky babies, mother-in-law politics. You become an outsider to feminine experience itself. Being a Vestal Virgin was a 30-year commitment. During that time, they had to take a vow of chastity, because only pure women were allowed to tend the sacred fire of Vesta. That meant no possibility of marriage or children for any woman selected until at least the age of 36 to 40. By the time you're free to marry, your fertile years are largely past. The biological clock that drives other women's choices has run out while you serve the goddess. The physical proximity to attractive men during ceremonies becomes its own form of torture. You stand close enough to smell their skin, feel their body heat, notice the way muscles move beneath their togas. During the Lupercalia festival, when half-naked men run through the streets, striking women with goatskin thongs to ensure fertility, you watch from your sacred distance, forbidden from participating in even this ritualized contact. Dreams provide your only escape, and they often betray you with visions of forbidden intimacy. You wake from dreams of lovers' embraces, feeling more isolated than ever. The shame compounds the loneliness. Even your unconscious desires feel like betrayals of your sacred vows. Some nights you weep silently into your pillow, mourning not just for what you lack, but for what you can never know. Your sister Vestals understand without words. You catch them sometimes staring into space with expressions of profound longing, or flinching slightly when male priests pass too close during ceremonies. The unspoken fellowship of shared sacrifice binds you together, but it also highlights what you've all lost: 6 women sharing the burden of perpetual denial. The psychological pressure sometimes breaks Vestals entirely. Some Vestals are said to have committed suicide when accused. Caparonia did so in 266. Perhaps the prospect of maintaining impossible purity for another decade proved unbearable. The mind finds strange ways to rebel against unnatural constraints. Yet, there's also strange freedom in your untouchable status. You move through Roman society as a kind of sexual Switzerland. Men cannot pursue you, women cannot compete with you for masculine attention. This liberation from romantic politics grants you unusual clarity about human relationships. You observe the desperate machinations of marriage, the jealousies and betrayals that consume ordinary women. and sometimes feel grateful for your enforced distance. The cruelest irony emerges in your 30s. Vestals typically retired with a state pension in their late 30s to early 40s, and thereafter were free to marry. The Pontifex Maximus, acting as the father of the bride, might arrange a marriage with a suitable Roman nobleman on behalf of the retired Vestal. But no literary accounts of such marriages have survived. By the time you're free to love, your body has passed its prime for childbearing. Men your age seek younger wives who can give them heirs. Plutarch repeats a claim that few have welcomed the indulgence, and that those who did so were not happy, but were a prey to repentance and dejection for the rest of their lives, thereby inspiring the rest with superstitious fears, so that until old age and death they remain steadfast in their virginity. The few Vestals who attempt marriage after their service often find the transition impossible. 30 years of ritual purity, supernatural status, and emotional isolation don't prepare you for the messy intimacies of married life. You sometimes wonder if the vow of chastity serves Rome's interests more than the goddess's will. Your sexual unavailability makes you safe. Men can't seduce you to betray state secrets. Rival families can't use marriage alliances to gain access to Vestal influence. Your enforced purity keeps you politically neutral, a valuable commodity in Rome's factional warfare. The desire doesn't diminish with age, it transforms. Sexual longing evolves into a deeper hunger for human connection, for the simple comfort of being held without ritual significance. You watch elderly couples in the forum, their hands clasped after decades of marriage, and feel an ache that cuts deeper than any physical yearning. Some nights, alone in your cell, you press your palm against the cool marble wall and imagine it's another person's touch. The fantasy brings momentary comfort before the weight of your isolation returns. You are Rome's most honored women and its loneliest, elevated above human desire, yet consumed by its absence. Historians still argue whether the sexual restrictions served religious purposes or political convenience, but living within them teaches you a brutal truth. Power and happiness rarely coincide. You wield influence that would make emperors envious, yet you trade it all for one night of ordinary human love. The Campus Celeratus, the field of wickedness, lies just inside Rome's walls near the Colline Gate, where unchaste Vestals face the most horrific death imaginable. A major scandal in 91 CE saw Chief Vestal Cornelia tried in absentia and convicted of incestum, sexual impurity, by the deceitful Emperor Domitian. While her alleged lovers were beaten to death, Cornelia was carried alive through the streets in a somber procession to a small underground chamber. Picture the underground chamber they've prepared for you. If you ever face this ultimate punishment, it's barely larger than a burial vault, carved from earth and stone, with walls that weep moisture in the darkness. It held a few provisions such as bread, milk, and a small bed. And with that, she was left to die. The provisions mock hope itself, enough food to keep you alive for days while you suffocate in the darkness. Enough time to fully comprehend your fate. The legal technicality that enables this horror reveals Roman religious logic at its most twisted. Roman law prohibited burial of the dead within the walls of the city. In order to circumvent this law, the Romans believed a Vestal was not technically entombed, but rather died a voluntary, bloodless death. By providing food and water, they pretend you're not being executed. You're simply being given shelter where you choose to die. The hypocrisy would be laughable if it weren't so terrifying. The procession to your doom unfolds with ritualized cruelty. The Pontifex Maximus, having lifted up his hands to heaven and uttered a secret prayer, opened the litter, led forth the culprit, and placing her on the steps of the ladder which gave access to the subterranean cell, delivered her over to the common executioner. You're carried through Rome's streets in a covered litter, gagged so your cries cannot be heard, bound so you cannot escape. Citizens line the route in silence, some weeping, others muttering prayers, all understanding they're witnessing the ultimate violation of everything sacred. The woman who could pardon condemned criminals with a touch now faces condemnation herself. The descent into the chamber becomes a grotesque inversion of religious ritual. As she was being lowered down into the subterranean vault, her robe happening to catch upon something in the descent, she turned round and disengaged it. When, the executioner offering his assistance, she drew herself back with horror, refusing to be so much as touched by him, maintaining ritual purity, even while being murdered for its violation. The psychology of live burial exploits every human terror simultaneously. You face death by suffocation, starvation, or despair, whichever claims you first. The darkness becomes absolute once they seal the entrance. The silence grows oppressive as oxygen slowly depletes. The cold stone walls close in like a premature grave, which is exactly what they are. The cruelest element? Time to think. Unlike a swift execution, live burial grants hours or days to contemplate your fate. You replay every moment that led to this chamber, questioning whether your accusers spoke truth or manufactured evidence for political gain. Some Vestals were probably used as scapegoats. Their political alliances and alleged failure to observe oaths and duties were held to account for civil disturbances, wars, famines, plagues, and other signs of divine displeasure. The few recorded accounts of unchaste Vestals reveal suspicious timing. Trials for Vestal incestum were extremely rare. Most took place during military or religious crises. When Rome faced defeat in war or divine displeasure manifested through natural disasters, the city's leaders needed scapegoats. What better target than a Vestal whose hidden corruption could explain any catastrophe? The paramours of guilty Vestals receive more merciful deaths. If discovered, the paramour of a guilty Vestal was publicly beaten to death by the Pontifex Maximus in the Forum Boarium or on the Comitium. Quick death by beating seems almost generous compared to slow suffocation in an underground vault. The man dies in sunlight. The woman dies in earth-black darkness. Yet even facing this ultimate horror, some Vestals maintain their dignity. Cornelia's final words echo through history. "Caesar thinks I am impure, I who have performed many rites by which he conquered and triumphed." Her defiance in the face of imperial tyranny transforms state murder into martyrdom. The rarity of such executions, perhaps 10 in 1,000 years, suggests that most accusations ended in acquittal or suicide before trial. The immurement of a Vestal was a very rare occurrence. We only know of a few instances in all of Roman history. Most of the Vestals who went on trial in the historical record were acquitted, not executed. But the threat hangs over every Vestal's head like a sword, a constant reminder that one false accusation could end in the campus sceleratus. Historians still argue whether any Vestals actually broke their vows, or if all such accusations represented political convenience masquerading as religious justice. But the existence of that underground chamber, that tomb for the living, reminds you that in Rome, even the most sacred women remain vulnerable to the most profane injustice. The political weaponization of Vestal accusations reaches its zenith under Emperor Domitian, whose reign of terror demonstrates how easily religious law becomes a tool of tyranny. Emperor Domitian executed 4 Vestal Virgins starting in 87 CE. This was part of a push toward cracking down on public morality. Like many reformers before and after, Domitian believed that people's morals weren't what they used to be, and that he could bring back the good old ways by punishing people for acting wrong. Picture yourself in the imperial court as Domitian plots his campaign of moral purification. His paranoid eyes survey the senators, searching for signs of disloyalty, while his twisted mind calculates how to demonstrate his authority over Rome's most untouchable citizens. Domitian was also notoriously hostile toward the Senate, and since the Vestals were the daughters of senatorial houses, killing them was a way to show the nobility who was boss. The case of Chief Vestal Cornelia illustrates this political calculation perfectly. The execution of Cornelia was a scandal in its day. She had been executed merely because the emperor wished to demonstrate his rigorous justice, however tyrannical. Punishing a Vestal signaled that he would maintain the purity and prosperity of Rome. No evidence suggested actual guilt, only Domitian's need to prove that even Rome's holiest women answered to his will. The trial proceeds without the accused present, a violation so outrageous that Pliny the Younger, 61-113 CE, made mention of it in his description of the entombment of Cornelia. You watch as senators shift uncomfortably in their seats, understanding that if the emperor can condemn a chief vestal without proper procedure, no one remains safe from his arbitrary justice. But Domitian's persecution represents merely the most extreme example of a pattern stretching back centuries. In 483 BC, during a period of social conflict between patricians and plebeians, the Vestal Oppia, perhaps the earliest of several historic Vestals of plebeian family, was executed for incestum merely on the basis of various portents and allegations that she neglected her Vestal duties. Divine displeasure required human sacrifice, and Vestals provided convenient victims. The famous trials of 114-113 BCE reveal how public pressure can override legal procedure. After the first trial acquitted 2 of 3 accused Vestals, the acquittal of Marcia and Licinia created public outrage in Rome because of Manius's testimony that the sexual crimes of the Vestals had been an open secret and tolerated among the aristocracy, and the public interpreted the outcome as a case of corruption among the elite. A tribune transferred the case from religious to civil courts, ensuring death sentences that satisfied the mob's demand for blood. You witness how easily accusation becomes conviction when political necessity demands it. The evidence often consists of nothing more than suspicious behavior. Another Vestal Virgin, named Postumia, was put on trial merely because of the way she dressed and the fact that she liked to make jokes. In Rome's honor-based society, appearing insufficiently grave or modest can become evidence of sexual corruption. The timing of accusations reveals their political nature. Throughout Rome's history, the sexual purity of the Vestals was closely linked to the health and well-being of the state. When Vestals were inducted into the cult, they were transferred from the authority of their fathers to the authority of the state, becoming daughters of the state. When the state faced crisis, its daughters provided ready scapegoats. Consider the broader implications. If emperors can manufacture evidence against Vestals, what protections exist for ordinary citizens? The destruction of women whose very purpose was maintaining Rome's divine favor sends a chilling message about imperial power. Even the gods' chosen servants can be sacrificed to political expedience. The psychological impact on surviving Vestals proves devastating. You watch your sisters jump at shadows, scrutinize every interaction with men, obsess over whether their clothing appears too fashionable or their manner too cheerful. The paranoia becomes infectious. If Cornelia could be condemned without evidence, any of you might be next. The accusations also reveal the intersection of religious and political authority. A sexual relationship between a citizen of Rome and a Vestal was therefore considered an act of incest, incestium, constituting both a violation of a social taboo and an act of treason against the city. By defining sexual activity as treason, the state transforms personal behavior into political crime, expanding its control over the most intimate aspects of human existence. Yet, some Vestals fight back against false accusations with courage that shames their accusers. Cornelia's final defiant words, "Caesar thinks I am impure, I who have performed many rites, by which he conquered and triumphed," expose the hypocrisy of emperors who benefit from Vestal purity, while destroying the women who maintain it. Historians still argue whether the political use of Vestal trials represented aberration or standard practice, but the pattern suggests a darker truth. In Rome, even the most sacred institutions serve the needs of power, and even the holiest women remain expendable when political necessity demands their sacrifice. Your daily sacred rituals begin before Rome awakens, in the pearl-grey light that precedes dawn. The Vestal's main job lay in caring for Vesta's eternal flame, which burned in a bronze container at the temple's center and could never be allowed to go out. Every morning, one Vestal checked the fuel, added wood or oil, and burned incense. Picture yourself padding barefoot across cold marble floors while the city still sleeps. Your white linen tunic whispers against your legs as you approach the sacred brazier, its golden flame casting dancing shadows on the temple walls. The morning inspection requires complete attention. You examine the flame's color, height, and steadiness, searching for any sign that divine favor might be waning. The ritual of fuel addition demands perfect precision. Too much olive oil and the flame flares dangerously, potentially cracking the bronze container that's held this fire for generations. Too little, and the flame dims ominously, sending panic through any Romans who might witness its weakness. Your hands, steady from years of practice, measure exactly 3 spoonfuls of the finest oil, each addition accompanied by whispered prayers. Another Vestal fetched holy water from the spring of the Aquae Vestae for rituals. This journey to the sacred spring becomes its own meditation. You carry a bronze vessel that has never touched common water, walking the familiar path through Rome's winding streets, while citizens bow their heads in respect. The spring bubbles from earth that predates the city itself, its water tasting somehow lighter, purer than ordinary liquid. The preparation of mola salsa consumes entire afternoons with work that would break a lesser woman's patience. They attended agricultural festivals throughout the year, the continuity of these traditions marking the unfaltering fortune of Rome that paralleled the sacred flame kept alight in perpetuity. You and your sisters harvest specific grains with bronze sickles during prescribed festivals, then spend hours grinding, sifting and mixing the sacred meal that will consecrate sacrifices throughout the empire. Your hands develop calluses from working the heavy bronze implements. Your back aches from bending over grinding stones, yet the repetitive work becomes almost hypnotic. Each grain of salt must be inspected, each measure of flour tested for proper consistency. The gods accept only perfection, and perfection requires obsessive attention to detail that would drive ordinary women to madness. The Vestal Virgins performed numerous rituals and ceremonies, which often involved the preparation of ritual foods like mola salsa, a sacred mixture used in offerings. But the food preparation extends beyond simple mixing. You learn the proper prayers for each ingredient, the correct hand positions during grinding, the specific number of clockwise turns required for proper consecration. Each recipe carries the weight of centuries. The temple cleaning becomes another form of worship. The Vestals regularly swept and cleansed Vesta's shrine, functioning as surrogate housekeepers in a religious sense for all of Rome. You scrub marble floors until they gleam like mirrors, polish bronze vessels until your reflection stares back flawlessly, arrange fresh flowers with the precision of an artist. This isn't mere housework, it's maintaining the physical manifestation of divine presence. The evening rituals prove equally demanding. As darkness falls, you light sacred lamps throughout the temple complex, each flame kindled from the eternal fire with ceremonial care. The process requires perfect timing. Too early, and you waste precious oil. Too late, and worshippers arriving for evening prayers find themselves in darkness. Their duties included tending the perpetual fire in the Temple of Vesta, keeping their vow of chastity, fetching water from a sacred spring. Vesta would have no water from the city water supply system, preparing ritual food, caring for objects in the temple's inner sanctuary. The inner sanctuary holds objects so sacred that even describing them risks divine punishment. You handle these artifacts with hands trembling from awe and terror. Cups that supposedly held Trojan wine, statues whose origins stretch back to Rome's mythical founding, relics that embody the city's connection to its divine protectors. The physical exhaustion accumulates over decades. Your knees ache from kneeling during long ceremonies. Your shoulders burn from carrying heavy ritual vessels. Your eyes water from smoke and fine incense. Yet the pain becomes offering itself, your body's sacrifice paralleling your spiritual dedication. Some days the routine feels crushing, endless repetition of identical tasks while life passes you by outside the temple walls. Other days, the rituals transport you to a state approaching ecstasy, each familiar gesture connecting you to generations of women who've performed these same sacred duties. The mundane and the mystical interweave until you can't distinguish between them. Historians still argue whether these elaborate daily rituals served practical religious purposes or simply kept the Vestals occupied with work that prevented dangerous idleness. But performing them teaches you a deeper truth. The sacred emerges not from grand gestures, but from perfect attention to seemingly ordinary tasks, repeated with devotion until they become prayers made flesh. The house of the Vestals becomes the nerve center of Roman political intelligence, where you safeguard the most explosive secrets in the empire. They could pardon condemned prisoners and safeguarded the wills of influential political figures such as Mark Antony and Julius Caesar. The Vestals were also tasked with the production of a ritual substance known as the mola salsa, used in various purification ceremonies, as well as safeguarding the wills of important Romans, including those of Julius Caesar, Mark Antony, and the Emperor Augustus. Picture the underground vaults beneath your residence, where bronze chests lined with purple silk hold documents that could topple governments. These aren't mere legal papers. They're the final confessions of dying emperors, the secret instructions for imperial succession, the evidence of conspiracies that could destroy senatorial families. Your hands shake slightly as you place Julius Caesar's will into its protective case, understanding that this parchment holds the power to reshape Roman politics. The trust placed in Vestals for such sensitive documents reflects a calculating political logic. You answer to no husband who might pressure you to reveal secrets, belong to no family faction that could benefit from leaked information, face no financial pressures that might make you susceptible to bribery. Your enforced isolation makes you the perfect confidential repository for Rome's most dangerous knowledge. But the psychological burden proves almost unbearable. You know which senators plan treason, which generals scheme rebellion, which imperial heirs plot patricide. Romans believed they possessed magical powers. If anybody condemned to death saw a Vestal on his way to being executed, he was to be freed, so long as it could be proven the meeting was not by design. Walking through the forum, you see men whose fate you could seal with a whispered word to the right emperor, yet your vows bind you to silence. The will of Mark Antony particularly troubles your sleep. You've read his final testament, as Vestals must to verify its authenticity, and learn details about his relationship with Cleopatra that could inflame public opinion against Octavian's enemies. The document sits in your vault like a coiled serpent, ready to strike when politically convenient. You understand that your role extends beyond religious duties into the realm of state espionage. Consider the delicate negotiations required when powerful men approach you with their final testaments. They can't simply hand over their wills. Protocol demands elaborate ceremonies that maintain the fiction of religious rather than political purpose. You listen as senators explain their spiritual needs while their eyes communicate the real message. Keep this document secret until my death, then ensure it reaches the right hands at the right moment. The palace intrigue intensifies during imperial transitions. The Vestals' intercession appears to have been a powerful force. Throughout Rome's history, numerous leaders sought to connect themselves to the Vestals' clemency in the hopes of gaining popularity for their regimes. Aspiring emperors court your favor through elaborate gifts and public honors, understanding that Vestal endorsement could legitimize their claims to power. You witness the corruption of your own sisterhood as political pressures mount. Some Vestals begin favoring certain factions, their religious decisions mysteriously aligning with political advantages. The chief Vestal's choice of which prisoners to pardon, which ceremonies to attend, which imperial invitations to accept. These seemingly spiritual matters carry enormous political weight. The most dangerous moments come when emperors demand access to documents you're sworn to protect. Claiming her innocence throughout, Cornelia railed against Domitian, 5196 CE, emperor at the time, crying out, "Caesar thinks I am impure, I who have performed many rites, by which he conquered and triumphed." When Domitian wants to examine Augustus's private correspondence, or when Nero seeks evidence against suspected conspirators, you face the impossible choice between religious duty and imperial command. Your knowledge extends beyond documents to overheard conversations. Senators and generals feel comfortable speaking freely around Vestals, assuming your religious status places you above political concerns. You learn of planned military campaigns, economic policies, marriage alliances, information that makes you incredibly valuable and incredibly vulnerable. The irony cuts deep. Your powerlessness in personal matters translates into enormous power in political ones. You can't choose your own romantic partners, yet you influence the selection of emperors. You can't bear children, yet you shape the inheritance of the world's most powerful families. The price of political influence proves to be the surrender of personal agency. The sacred storage of wills occasionally requires dramatic interventions. When suspicious deaths occur, you must decide whether to reveal testamentary documents immediately or wait for proper legal proceedings. These decisions can determine whether evidence of murder emerges or remains buried with its victims. Historians still argue whether Vestals actively participated in political plotting or simply served as unwilling repositories for others' schemes. But living within this web of secrets, you understand that knowledge itself constitutes a form of power. Dangerous, isolating, and impossible to escape once you possess it. The economic power of the Vestal Virgins creates a financial empire that rivals the holdings of Rome's wealthiest senators. They could own property, vote, and write a will. A Vestal secured a life of longevity and luxury, attaining rights normally only available to elite males. They had a guaranteed income from a regular pension, the right to accumulate their own personal estates. Picture yourself reviewing the ledgers in your private study, calculating the returns on your latest investment in Egyptian grain shipments. The numbers astound even you. Your portfolio now includes urban rental properties, agricultural estates across Italy, shares in trading ventures that reach from Britain to India, and loans to senators at interest rates that would make professional moneylenders envious. Marcus Licinius Crassus was one of the richest and most powerful Roman citizens in the 1st century BC, yet he nearly lost it all, his life included, when he was accused of being too intimate with Licinia, a Vestal Virgin. He was brought to trial, where his true motives emerged. As the 1st century historian Plutarch recounts, Licinia was the owner of a pleasant villa in the suburbs which Crassus wished to get at a low price. The case of Licinia and Crassus reveals how Vestal wealth attracts Rome's most powerful predators. Crassus, despite being one of the empire's richest men, covets Licinia's suburban villa so desperately that he's willing to risk accusations of sacrilege. His persistent courtship has nothing to do with desire and everything to do with acquiring prime real estate at below market prices. Your financial independence stems from multiple sources that compound over decades of accumulation. The state provides generous annual stipends, enough to support a senatorial lifestyle without any additional income. But the real wealth comes from your freedom to invest these funds without male oversight. They were allowed to make a will without the oversight of a male guardian, a privilege that was denied to most women, who had to remain under the legal control of their fathers or husbands. Consider the investment opportunities available to someone with your unique position. Senators approach you with insider information about coming military campaigns, knowing you have capital to invest in supplying armies. Merchants offer partnership deals, understanding that your sacred status protects joint ventures from certain legal challenges. Even emperors sometimes seek Vestal financing for public works projects, recognizing that your backing legitimizes their expenditures. Your property empire expands strategically across the Mediterranean. That vineyard in Gaul produces wine for imperial banquets. Those apartment buildings in Alexandria generate steady rental income from wealthy merchants. The olive groves in Spain supply oil for both commercial sale and temple rituals. Each investment spreads your financial risk while building long-term wealth. The irony of your economic situation provides dark comedy. You own vast estates, but can never live on them as mistress of your own household. You possess rental properties, but can never experience the domestic life of your tenants. You finance trading ventures, but can never travel to see the exotic ports where your ships dock. Wealth without the freedom to enjoy it fully. Your financial records require careful discretion. Other Romans mustn't realize how rich individual Vestals have become, lest they question whether sacred virgins should accumulate such worldly wealth. You employ trusted freedmen to manage the most sensitive investments, maintaining the fiction that your concerns remain purely spiritual while your business empire expands across continents. The lending business proves particularly lucrative. Senators, desperate for cash to finance campaigns or gladiatorial games, pay premium interest rates for loans from sources that won't demand political favors in return. Your religious status makes you a neutral creditor. You can't marry into their families or threaten their political positions, making you safer than traditional moneylenders. Some investments carry ethical complications that trouble your conscience. You own shares in slave trading ventures that generate enormous profits but contribute to human misery. Your agricultural estates depend on slave labor that you supervise from comfortable distance. The wealth that grants you independence rests partly on the bondage of others. Additional discoveries include domestic items such as fragments of frescoes, oil lamps, pottery shards, and luxury items such as jewelry and glassware, suggesting that the Vestals lived in relative opulence. Archaeological evidence confirms that your lifestyle rivals that of imperial family members. Silk curtains, ivory furniture, silver dining sets, rare spices, imported delicacies, every comfort wealth can provide, except the fundamental human experiences of love and family. The estate planning becomes incredibly complex, given your unique legal status. You must balance bequests to family members you haven't seen in decades, charitable gifts to maintain your reputation for piety, and provisions for the freed slaves who've managed your business affairs. Your will becomes a political document that could influence Roman politics long after your death. Historians still argue whether Vestal wealth represented religious corruption or simply reflected their elevated status within Roman society. But calculating your net worth as you approach retirement, you understand that economic power provides its own form of priesthood, the worship of accumulated capital that grants influence but never satisfaction. The most infamous trials in Vestal history unfold like political theatre, where religious law masks personal vendettas and imperial paranoia. Aemilia, Licinia, and Marcia were Roman Vestal Virgins, who were prosecuted for having broken the vow of chastity in two famous trials between 115 and 113 BC. The first trial was conducted by the Pontifex Maximus Metellus Delmaticus, who sentenced Aemilia to death in 114 BC. Picture yourself in the tense atmosphere following a disturbing omen that rocks Roman society. In 114 BCE came a bizarre prodigy. The young daughter of a prominent equestrian was struck by lightning while riding her horse, and was found dead with her tongue sticking out and her dress hiked to her waist. Officials interpreted this as a sign of a scandal between an equestrian and a Vestal virgin. The religious authorities immediately seek scapegoats for this divine displeasure. The accusations against the three Vestals reveal the political undercurrents that drive such prosecutions. Aemilia, from the powerful patrician gens Aemilia, allegedly corrupted the other two younger women. The trial was a great scandal in contemporary Rome. Aemilia was found guilty and sentenced to death by the Pontifex Maximus Lucius Caecilius Metellus Dalmaticus. Licinia and Marcia were both acquitted, but the acquittals trigger public outrage that reveals the deeper dynamics at play. The acquittal of Marcia and Licinia created public outrage in Rome because of Manius's testimony that the sexual crimes of the Vestals had been an open secret and tolerated among the aristocracy, and the public interpreted the outcome as a case of corruption among the elite. The mob demands blood, convinced that wealthy families have purchased their daughters' freedom through bribery. The pressure forces a second trial that abandons religious procedure for civil courts. The case against Licinia and Marcia was therefore reopened the following year by the tribune Sextus Pedusius, who took the unusual step of transferring the case from the pontiff to Lucius Cassius Longinus Revilla, who was known for his severity. This unprecedented move shows how public opinion can override sacred law when political necessity demands satisfaction. Licinia was defended by the orator Lucius Licinius Crassus. The second trial ended in a guilty verdict for both Licinia and Marcia, who were both sentenced to be executed by being buried alive. Even Rome's most skilled advocate cannot save them from a system determined to produce victims. The trial of Cornelia under Domitian represents the ultimate corruption of Vestal justice. Unlike most criminal proceedings against Vestals, this particular session was conducted without the accused there to defend herself. Something so notable that Pliny the Younger, 61–113 CE, made mention of it in his description of the entombment of Cornelia. The emperor dispenses with even the pretense of fair procedure. Consider the psychological warfare involved in these prosecutions. Accusers know they need produce no physical evidence. Circumstantial details suffice to condemn. Another Vestal Virgin named Postumia was put on trial merely because of the way she dressed and the fact that she liked to make jokes. Suspicions first arose against Minutia through an improper love of dress and the evidence of a slave. Fashion choices and personality traits become evidence of sexual corruption. The defense strategies available to accused Vestals rely more on theatre than law. The Vestal Virgin Tuccia was accused of having breached her vow of chastity, but she proved her innocence by carrying water in a sieve. This apparent miracle saved her life. When legal evidence fails, supernatural demonstration provides the only hope for acquittal. The political calculations behind these trials become transparent when you examine their timing. Of the 3 Vestals executed for incestium between the First Punic War, 216, and the end of the Republic, 113–111, each was followed by a nameless, bloodless form of human sacrifice, seemingly reserved for times of extreme crisis. The executions serve as religious theatre, designed to appease divine anger during military or political disasters. The treatment of alleged male paramours reveals the gender dynamics at play. While her alleged lovers were beaten to death, Cornelia was carried alive through the streets in a somber procession to a small underground chamber. Men receive swift, relatively merciful deaths, while women face prolonged psychological torture before suffocation. Some Vestals choose suicide over the ordeal of trial and potential live burial. Some Vestals are said to have committed suicide when accused. Caparonia did so in 266. Death by one's own hand preserves dignity, while avoiding the ritualized humiliation of public prosecution. The broader pattern reveals how accusations against Vestals function as weapons in Rome's perpetual political warfare. Enemies can destroy each other by targeting their female relatives serving as priestesses. The sacred status that should protect these women actually makes them more vulnerable, since their destruction carries greater symbolic weight than attacking ordinary citizens. The immurement of a Vestal was a very rare occurrence. We only know of a few instances in all of Roman history. Most of the Vestals who went on trial in the historical record were acquitted, not executed. Yet the few documented cases cast a shadow over the entire institution, creating an atmosphere of paranoia where any Vestal might face false accusation during times of political crisis. The survivors of these trials, both acquitted and condemned, carry psychological scars that never heal. You watch as formerly confident sisters become withdrawn and fearful, scrutinizing every interaction with men, obsessing over whether their behavior might be misinterpreted. The mere possibility of accusation transforms vibrant women into nervous shadows of themselves. The role of slaves as witnesses and accusers reveals another disturbing dynamic. Amelia, Lysenia, and Martia were executed after being denounced by the servant of a barbarian horseman. Household slaves, desperate to avoid punishment for their own transgressions, purchased their freedom by fabricating testimony against their mistresses. The powerless destroy the powerful through strategic lies. The legal procedures themselves become instruments of torture. Accused Vestals face interrogation designed to break their resolve rather than establish truth. Questions probe intimate details of their daily routines, seeking any evidence of suspicious behavior. The priests conducting these trials show more interest in extracting confessions than examining evidence objectively. The impact on Vestal recruitment becomes immediate and lasting. Noble families begin withdrawing their daughters from consideration, preferring to pay fines rather than risk having their children destroyed by false accusations. Augustus's ongoing involvement with the cult may have tainted it with the politics of the Civil War. The association with imperial politics makes Vestal service more dangerous, not more prestigious. The trials also reveal the limits of Vestal power, despite their elevated status. These women who can pardon condemned criminals with a touch, who own vast estates and influence imperial policy, remain vulnerable to accusations they cannot effectively refute. Their supernatural status makes them sacred, but also expendable when political necessity demands sacrifice. The documentation of these trials becomes propaganda for later emperors. Detailed accounts of Vestal executions serve as warnings to anyone who might challenge imperial authority. If the gods' chosen servants can be destroyed for alleged transgressions, what protection exists for ordinary mortals who displease their rulers? Some historians interpret these trials as evidence of actual moral corruption among the Vestals, suggesting that wealth and privilege led to religious decay. Others see them as purely political theatre, with innocents sacrificed to satisfy public demand for scapegoats during times of crisis. The truth likely encompasses both interpretations. Some accusations may have been justified, while others represented calculated political murder. The psychological profile of emperors who persecute Vestals reveals important patterns. Domitian's paranoia and need to demonstrate moral authority drive his campaign against the priestesses. Earlier rulers used Vestal trials to deflect blame for military defeats or natural disasters. In each case, attacking Rome's holiest women serves the political needs of insecure leaders. The aftermath of these famous trials transforms the entire institution. Surviving Vestals become more conservative in their behavior, more cautious in their political associations, more isolated from Roman society. The fear of false accusation creates exactly the kind of religious timidity that undermines the confident authority these women once projected. Historians still argue whether the famous Vestal trials represented justice, political convenience, or something between the two. But examining the pattern of accusations, the timing of prosecutions, and the procedures followed in these cases reveals a disturbing truth. Even in Rome's most sacred institutions, power serves itself first and seeks divine sanction afterward. The relationship between emperors and Vestals evolves into a complex dance of mutual dependence and potential destruction, with each ruler manipulating sacred authority to serve political goals. The Vestals' privileges and powers, however, were by no means static or unchanging. They developed and altered as the political and social climate of Rome changed. Picture Augustus, Rome's first emperor, carefully cultivating Vestal support to legitimize his revolutionary transformation of the Republic. Augustus included the Vestals in all major dedications and ceremonies. You watch as he positions himself at public events near the sacred priestesses, understanding that their presence sanctifies his unprecedented accumulation of power. The visual message becomes unmistakable. The gods' chosen women endorse this new political order. But Augustus's patronage comes with strings attached that gradually transform your independence into imperial service. Augustus also changed the rules regarding membership in the cult. In the Republic, the sacred virgins were drawn at first from aristocratic families and later from the Roman citizen body as a whole. But as the Vestal cult became more closely associated with the emperor, fewer and fewer noble families volunteered their daughters for service. The emperor's involvement creates a dangerous precedent that future rulers exploit ruthlessly. You witness how the role of Pontifex Maximus, traditionally a religious position, becomes an imperial tool for controlling sacred institutions. When the emperor personally oversees Vestal selection and supervision, the priestesses become extensions of imperial will rather than independent servants of the goddess. Augustus granted the Vestals the supreme honor as the only women to sit right at the front of the theater and gladiatorial contests. These privileges appear generous, but actually serve Augustus's political interests. Your presence at gladiatorial games legitimizes the brutal entertainment that keeps the masses docile. Your approval of public executions sanctifies imperial justice. Your participation in triumphal processions endorses military conquests that expand the emperor's power. The gladiatorial games reveal the dark side of this imperial relationship. Those who were killed had committed what Romans believed to be the worst sorts of crimes: theft from a temple, armed robbery, burglary at night, arson, and the like. Their deaths represented the return of social order, and the Vestal's willingness to withhold clemency and to witness the executions helped give divine sanction to the emperor's harsh justice. You find yourself trapped in moral complicity with imperial violence. When condemned criminals look to you for the mercy that might save their lives, your decision to grant or withhold clemency becomes a political statement. Pardoning too many prisoners suggests the emperor's justice is flawed. Pardoning too few makes you complicit in state murder. Every choice carries political consequences you never sought. Different emperors manipulate Vestal authority in distinct ways. Augustus uses subtle patronage and public honors to co-opt sacred authority. Domitian employs direct intimidation and manufactured trials to demonstrate imperial supremacy over religious law. Nero exploits Vestal wealth and connections for personal benefit, while publicly honoring their sacred status. The transformation becomes most visible during imperial succession crises. You watch as competing claimants court Vestal endorsement, understanding that religious legitimacy could tip the balance in civil wars. When Julius Caesar included the Vestals in his will provisions, he wasn't just being generous. He was ensuring their financial interest in his political survival. The pressure to take sides in imperial politics destroys the traditional neutrality that made Vestals valuable as arbiters and mediators. When the dictator, Sulla, included the young Julius Caesar on his death list of political opponents, the Vestals interceded on Caesar's behalf and gained him pardon. Such interventions become impossible when emperors demand absolute loyalty rather than independent judgment. Your sister Vestals begin developing distinct political leanings that reflect their imperial connections. Those chosen during Augustus's reign maintain loyalty to his successors. Priestesses, selected by later emperors, feel obligated to support their patron's interests. The collegium fractures along lines of imperial favoritism that would have been unthinkable during the Republic. The corruption of religious independence accelerates under paranoid rulers who interpret any autonomous action as potential treason. Domitian's persecution of Cornelia sets a precedent that makes every emperor a potential threat to Vestal survival. Future rulers understand they can manufacture religious charges to eliminate inconvenient priestesses while claiming to defend moral purity. The economic dependence deepens imperial control over Vestal affairs. When emperors control the priestesses' state stipends and can influence their private investments through policy decisions, financial pressure supplements religious authority as a tool of manipulation. Your wealth, which should guarantee independence, becomes another chain binding you to imperial favor. The psychological impact proves devastating for women trained to see themselves as servants of divine rather than earthly authority. You struggle with the cognitive dissonance of maintaining religious purity while participating in political theatre. The role that once elevated you above human concerns now mires you deeper in the ugliest aspects of imperial competition. Some emperors attempt to restore traditional Vestal independence, recognizing that their authority benefits from association with genuinely sacred institutions. But the precedents of imperial manipulation prove impossible to reverse. Once emperors demonstrate they can destroy Vestals for political convenience, the threat remains even when temporarily unused. Historians still argue whether imperial patronage ultimately strengthened or weakened the Vestal institution. But experiencing the transformation from sacred independence to political instrument, you understand that power shared is power diminished, and that even divine authority becomes mundane when it serves too obviously human purposes. The Christian assault on Roman religious traditions begins subtly but accelerates into systematic destruction that will extinguish your sacred flame forever. The laws of our ancestors provided for the Vestal Virgins and the ministers of the gods a moderate maintenance and just privileges. This gift was preserved inviolate till the time of the degenerate money changers who diverted the maintenance of sacred chastity into a fund for the payment of base porters. Picture the gradual changes you witness as Christianity gains influence in the imperial court. Over time, Christian emperors slowly stopped supporting Rome's pagan cults. In 382 AD, Emperor Gratian withdrew the Vestals' funding. The financial blow strikes first. Your state stipends disappear, forcing reliance on accumulated private wealth that can't sustain the elaborate rituals and building maintenance that have continued for over 1,000 years. You watch helplessly as Emperor Gratian, influenced by Christian advisors, systematically dismantles the legal foundations of your institution. The privileges that made Vestal service attractive to noble families evaporate. The exemptions from taxation that supported your vast estates disappear. The ceremonial honors that marked your elevated status get transferred to Christian bishops and abbesses. The religious arguments against Vestal traditions reveal the fundamental incompatibility between old and new faiths. Christian theologians denounce the eternal flame as demon worship, the sacred spring water as superstitious nonsense, the mola salsa as pagan magic that insults the one true God. Everything you've dedicated your life to preserving becomes evidence of spiritual corruption in Christian eyes. A public famine ensued on this act, and a bad harvest disappointed the hopes of all the provinces. It was sacrilege, which rendered the year barren, for it was necessary that all should lose that which they had denied to religion. The irony cuts deep. Crop failures, following the withdrawal of Vestal funding, seem to validate pagan warnings about divine displeasure. Yet, Christian authorities dismiss such correlations as coincidence. The psychological warfare proves more devastating than legal persecution. Christian preachers denounce celibate priestesses as unnatural violations of God's plan for women, who should marry and bear children rather than worship false idols. Your sacrifice for Rome's spiritual welfare becomes sin in the new religious paradigm. The very virginity that made you sacred makes you suspect in Christian theology. You witness the conversion of aristocratic families that once competed to place daughters in Vestal service. Former supporters now view association with pagan priestesses as dangerous to their souls and political prospects. The isolation that always marked Vestal life intensifies as Roman society itself turns against tradition. The recruitment crisis becomes insurmountable as Christian families refuse to consider Vestal service for their daughters. Why sacrifice a child to serve demons when convents offer respectable alternatives that don't require the terrible vow of perpetual virginity? Why risk divine judgment for participating in rituals that new theology defines as satanic? Dissolution of the Vestal College would have followed soon after the Emperor Gratian confiscated its revenues in 382 AD. The last epigraphically attested Vestal is Coelia Concordia, a Virgo Vestalis Maxima, who in 385 AD erected a statue to the deceased pontiff Vettius Agorius Praetextatus. You realize you're witnessing the final generation of an institution that has survived for over a millennium. The symbolic attacks hurt more than practical persecution. Zosimos claims that when Theodosius I visited Rome in 394 AD, his niece, Serena, insulted an aged Vestal, said to be the last of her kind. The casual cruelty of this gesture, a young Christian woman deliberately humiliating an elderly priestess, exemplifies how completely Roman attitudes have shifted. The final blow comes with breathtaking swiftness. This collegium existed until it was abolished in 394 CE by Roman Emperor Theodosius I. After surviving the rise and fall of kings, the chaos of civil wars, the madness of tyrants, and the transformation of republic into empire, your institution dies with a simple imperial decree. The practical dismantling proves heartbreakingly mundane. Christian officials inventory sacred objects, melting down gold vessels to fund church construction, breaking marble statues to build baptismal fonts, burning ancient manuscripts to heat water for Christian ceremonies. The Penus Vesti, with its mysterious Trojan artifacts, becomes treasure to be divided among politically connected Christians. The extinguishing of the eternal flame marks the end of an era in human civilization. Though today many believe that the cult of Vesta had Etruscan origins, according to Roman historian Livy, 59 BCE, 70 CE, the College of Vestals was founded by the legendary second king, Numa Pompilius, 753 to 673 BCE, in the 7th century BCE, lasting until 394 CE, when Theodosius I, 347-395 CE, dissolved pagan religions by decree in favor of Christianity, forever quenching the sacred fire. You stand in the temple of Vesta as the flame that has burned for over 1,000 years gutters and dies. No ceremony marks this moment. No ritual acknowledges the end of traditions that predate Rome's greatest monuments. The fire simply exhausts its fuel, and darkness claims the circular temple that once represented the spiritual heart of an empire. The aftermath reveals the connection between religious transformation and political decay. The twilight of the Vestal Virgins mirrored the fall of the Roman Empire, with only 82 years separating them in a history that spanned a millennium. Some contemporaries argue that destroying Rome's protective deities invited the barbarian invasions that followed. the scattered remnants of your sisterhood face uncertain futures. Some attempt to maintain private devotions to Vesta, risking persecution as the Christian state grows more intolerant. Others convert and enter convents, finding pale echoes of Vestal life in Christian monasticism. A few simply disappear into obscurity, their identities erased along with their institution. Historians still argue whether Christianity deliberately targeted Vestal traditions or simply allowed them to wither through neglect. But experiencing the systematic dismantling of everything you've held sacred, you understand that revolutions succeed not just through dramatic gestures, but through the patient destruction of competing sources of meaning and authority. The last epigraphically attested Vestal is Soelia Concordia, a Virgo Vestalis Maxima, who in 385 AD erected a statue to the deceased pontiff Vettius Agorius Prior Textatus. You are Coelia Concordia, the final chief Vestal, watching an ancient world die around you while maintaining sacred duties that increasingly seem like gestures into an empty void. Picture yourself in the twilight of the 4th century, walking through a forum that echoes with change. Christian churches rise among pagan temples, their bells competing with the ancient rhythms of Roman religious life. The statue you've just erected to Prior Textatus, a pontiff who defended traditional religion until his death, stands as both memorial and defiance, a statement that someone still honors the old ways. Your daily routines continue with mechanical precision, even as their meaning drains away. You tend the eternal flame each dawn, knowing that imperial decrees could extinguish it any day. You prepare the mola salsa, understanding that fewer and fewer ceremonies require its sacred properties. You maintain the temple's cleanliness, while Christian officials debate whether to tear down its marble columns for building material. The loneliness proves almost unbearable. Your sister Vestals have dwindled through natural death and lack of recruitment, until you serve, essentially, alone. The conversations that once filled the house of the Vestals, debates about ritual procedures, gossip about Roman politics, shared memories of festival celebrations, have vanished into silence, broken only by the echo of your own footsteps. Zosimos claims that when Theodosius C visited Rome in 394 AD, his niece Serena insulted an aged Vestal, said to be the last of her kind. You are that aged Vestal, experiencing the casual cruelty of a young Christian woman who sees your entire life's devotion as foolish superstition worthy only of mockery. The insult burns more than any physical assault because it represents how completely Roman attitudes have shifted. Consider the weight of being the last. Every ritual you perform might be the final time those ancient words are spoken. Every sacred object you handle might never again receive proper veneration. The accumulated wisdom of over 1,000 years of Vestal tradition rests entirely in your aging memory, with no young priestesses to receive its transmission. The practical pressures mount relentlessly. With state funding eliminated, you struggle to maintain the temple complex using your personal wealth. Servants abandon their posts for more secure employment with Christian households. The elaborate ceremonies that once drew thousands of worshippers now attract only a handful of elderly traditionalists who risk social ostracism by attending. Your relationship with imperial authority becomes increasingly surreal. You technically remain a state official with ceremonial duties, yet the state actively works to eliminate everything you represent. Christian emperors invite you to palace functions as a gesture toward religious tolerance, while simultaneously drafting legislation that will destroy your institution. The symbolic violence escalates as zealous Christians target pagan monuments. You watch helplessly as sacred groves are cut down, as ancient statues are defaced, as temples are converted into churches through architectural rape that obliterates their original meaning. The physical destruction mirrors the cultural annihilation occurring throughout the empire. Your memory becomes a battlefield where past and present clash with devastating force. You remember the house of the Vestals, filled with young voices learning sacred songs, yet you wake each morning to silence. You recall the respect that once accompanied your public appearances, yet now you face suspicious stares and whispered accusations of witchcraft. The theological questions torture your aging mind. Have you wasted your entire life serving false gods? Do the Christians speak truth when they claim exclusive access to divine favor? Yet the counter-evidence seems equally compelling. How can traditions that sustained Rome for centuries suddenly become worthless superstition? The final imperial decree arrives with devastating simplicity. Like other non-Christian cults, it was banned in AD 394 by Theodosius I. A few lines of imperial Latin dissolve an institution older than most of Rome's greatest monuments. No ceremony marks the end. No ritual acknowledges the significance of this moment in human history. You face the practical question of what to do with sacred objects accumulated over centuries. Some items, gold vessels, precious gems, rare fabrics, might be sold to support your remaining years. Others, ritual implements, ancient manuscripts, mysterious artifacts from the Penus Vestae, seem too sacred for mundane disposal, yet too dangerous to preserve under the new Christian order. The extinguishing of the eternal flame becomes your final act as a Vestal Virgin. No text records the exact moment when the fire that had burned continuously for over a millennium finally died, but you carry that memory with you like a coal in your heart. The circular temple grows dark and cold, its bronze brazier empty for the first time since Rome's earliest days. Your personal future remains uncertain in ways that would have been unimaginable for previous Vestals. Retirement usually meant comfortable obscurity, supported by accumulated wealth and state pensions. Now, you face a hostile world where your former sacred status makes you a target for Christian persecution, and your considerable wealth attracts predators who understand your vulnerability. Some former Vestals convert to Christianity and enter convents, finding pale echoes of their previous lives in monastic communities. Others maintain private devotions to Vesta while publicly conforming to Christian expectations. A few simply disappear from historical record, their fates unknown and probably tragic. You choose defiance over submission, maintaining private rituals in your personal residence even after the temple closes. The goddess deserves faithful service regardless of imperial edicts or social pressure. If you are truly the last Vestal Virgin, then preserving Vesta's worship until your final breath becomes your ultimate sacred duty. The ruins of the House of the Vestals lie open to tourists and archaeologists today, their broken stones telling stories that written records can never fully capture. Excavations have revealed a series of interconnected rooms with mosaic floors, marble decorations, and statues of past Vestal Virgins. Inscriptions on the statue bases commemorate the achievements and virtues of these women, effectively creating a hall of honor within the residence. Picture yourself walking through the archaeological site where your ancient sisters once lived, the excavated foundations now revealing secrets buried for over 15 centuries. The central courtyard, once alive with the whispered conversations of priestesses, now hosts only the footsteps of modern visitors trying to imagine lives so different from their own. The House of the Vestals consists of several key structures, arranged around a large peristyle courtyard. The residence itself was a large, multi-storied complex with a central courtyard, surrounded by colonnaded walkways and numerous rooms that served as living quarters, ceremonial spaces, and storage areas. The statues that still line the courtyard provide the most haunting connection to the women who actually lived here. In 1883, Rodolfo Lanciani, director of antiquities for Rome, discovered the first Vestal statues. The recovery of the Vestal's house and the objects contained therein was an exciting moment in Roman archaeology. Newspapers were filled with details about the huge numbers of sculptures, inscriptions, jewelry, coins, and terracotta figures. Each marble face tells a story of individual achievement within institutional constraint. The inscriptions reveal names, accomplishments, and the peculiar honors accorded to women who wielded power while surrendering personal freedom. You read dedications to Vestals who served during specific imperial reigns, who performed memorable rituals, who embodied the virtues their society most valued in its sacred guardians. Molly M. Lindner examines the sculptural presentation of the Vestal Virgins and investigates what images of long-dead women tell us about their lives. She addresses why these portraits were created and why they only began to appear in the late 1st or 2nd century CE, much later than portraits of other Roman priestesses. The timing of these portraits suggests that Vestal prestige peaked during the imperial period, when association with emperors made their images politically valuable. The archaeological evidence reveals luxury that modern visitors find surprising. Additional discoveries include domestic items, such as fragments of frescoes, oil lamps, pottery shards, and luxury items such as jewelry and glassware, suggesting that the Vestals lived in relative opulence. These weren't ascetic monks living in deliberate poverty, but wealthy women enjoying every material comfort their enforced celibacy might theoretically compensate. The building's evolution tells the story of institutional development across centuries. The Republican period saw the construction of a more defined residence, while the imperial period introduced luxurious elements, including an expansive peristyle courtyard, as well as the addition of sophisticated hydraulic and drainage systems, evidence of increased wealth and imperial patronage. Modern technology reveals details invisible to earlier archaeologists. Ground-penetrating radar maps underground chambers that might contain additional artifacts. Chemical analysis of mortar and marble traces construction phases with precision that helps date specific architectural elements. Digital reconstruction allows virtual tours through spaces that existed 2 millennia ago. The most intriguing discoveries involve items that suggest the daily realities of Vestal life. Cosmetic containers hint at the attention these women paid to their appearance, despite religious vows. Gaming pieces suggest leisure activities that made long years of service bearable. Personal jewelry, rings, bracelets, hairpins, reminds us that these were individual women with personal tastes and preferences. Some archaeological mysteries may never be solved. The exact location and contents of the Penus Vestae remain unknown, though excavators continue searching for the underground chamber that held Rome's most sacred secrets. The arrangements of specific rooms can be mapped, but their exact functions often remain speculative based on architectural analysis and historical parallels. The preservation of organic materials proves disappointing but understandable. Textiles, wooden objects, leather goods, and papyrus documents that would illuminate daily Vestal life have vanished through decay. The marble, bronze, and ceramic remains that survive provide only partial glimpses into lives that encompass so much more than their material remnants suggest. Contemporary archaeologists approach the site with different questions than their 19th century predecessors. Instead of seeking treasures for museum display, modern scholars investigate social structures, economic systems, religious practices, and gender dynamics. The same broken pottery that earlier excavators discarded now provides crucial evidence about trade networks, dietary habits, and technological development. The tourism that funds continued archaeological work creates its own tensions. Visitor foot traffic accelerates erosion of ancient surfaces. The desire for dramatic discoveries sometimes conflicts with careful stratigraphic excavation. The need for public access must be balanced against preservation requirements that might argue for limiting exposure to the elements. Digital archives now preserve detailed documentation of every artifact, inscription, and architectural feature. Three-dimensional scanning creates virtual models that allow scholars worldwide to study the site without physical travel. This technological preservation might outlast the physical ruins themselves, ensuring that future generations can explore the House of the Vestals, even if climate change or urban development threatens the original stones. The comparison with other contemporary religious sites reveals both unique and universal elements in Vestal architecture. The emphasis on water features reflects the goddess's connection to hearth and home. The quality of materials demonstrates the wealth devoted to housing Rome's most important priestesses. The security features, limited entrances, walls separating sacred from public spaces, show the care taken to protect these valuable women. Historians still argue whether the archaeological evidence supports or contradicts the literary sources about Vestal life. The luxury revealed by excavations seems to confirm accounts of wealthy, privileged women, yet the institutional structures suggest more regimentation and control than some ancient authors implied. The material record and textual tradition don't always align perfectly. The legacy of the Vestal Virgins ripples through history in ways both obvious and subtle, influencing concepts of feminine power, religious authority, and institutional celibacy that persist into our modern world. The privileged position of the Vestal Virgins in Roman society survived for more than 1,000 years, passing through Rome's changing systems of monarchy, republic, and empire. Picture the medieval Christian abbesses who inherited fragments of Vestal authority, women who controlled vast monastic estates, influenced political decisions, and maintained educational institutions while bound by vows of perpetual chastity. The parallel isn't coincidental. Early Christian communities borrowed institutional structures from successful pagan precedents, adapting Vestal models to serve new theological purposes. The concept of sacred virginity that the Vestals embodied transforms rather than disappears with Christianity's triumph. Brigham Young University Scholars Archive. From Vestal Virgin to Bride of Christ, elements of a Roman cult in early Christian asceticism suggest direct connections between Vestal traditions and Christian monastic practices. The idea that sexual purity grants special access to divine power migrates from pagan to Christian contexts virtually unchanged. Consider how modern institutions echo Vestal structures in unexpected ways. Supreme Court justices serve for life terms, removed from normal political pressures through institutional independence. Federal Reserve board members make crucial decisions affecting millions while insulated from direct democratic control. The Vestal model of granting extraordinary authority to individuals who sacrifice normal human experiences persists in secular forms. The archaeological rediscovery of Vestal sites in the 18th and 19th centuries coincided with emerging debates about women's rights and capabilities. The discovery of a house of the Vestals in Pompeii made the Vestal Virgins a popular subject in the 18th and 19th centuries. Victorian feminists found inspiration in ancient examples of women wielding economic and political power, even at tremendous personal cost. The artistic representations of Vestals reveal changing cultural attitudes toward feminine authority. Neoclassical painters depicted them as noble martyrs to duty. Romantic poets portrayed them as tragic figures denied love's fulfillment, while modern feminist scholars analyze them as examples of how patriarchal societies simultaneously elevate and constrain exceptional women. The tension between individual fulfillment and institutional service that defined Vestal life resonates through contemporary debates about career women, work-life balance, and the costs of professional advancement. Modern executives who sacrifice family relationships for corporate success face psychological pressures that would have been familiar to ancient priestesses struggling with enforced celibacy. The Vestal concept of institutional neutrality influences modern professional ethics. Judges recuse themselves from cases involving personal conflicts. Journalists maintain objectivity by avoiding political entanglements. The idea that certain roles require practitioners to transcend normal human connections and loyalties traces back to institutions like the Vestal College. Educational systems worldwide still grapple with questions that Vestal training addressed. How young is too young to make life-altering commitments? What psychological pressures result from separating children from their families for institutional purposes? How do you prepare individuals for roles that require sacrifice of normal human experiences? The economic model of Vestal independence, state stipends combined with investment freedom, prefigures modern discussions about universal basic income, women's financial autonomy, and the relationship between economic security and personal liberty. These ancient priestesses achieved financial independence that remained unavailable to most women until the 20th century. Due to the nature of their work, the term Vestal is sometimes used to describe someone who maintains an archaic tradition. Contemporary usage of Vestal as an adjective meaning pure, traditional, or ceremonially significant, shows how thoroughly these women's symbolic meaning has outlived their actual institution. The study of Vestal Virgins contributes to broader scholarly discussions about gender, power, and religious authority in ancient societies. Their unique position, powerful yet constrained, sacred yet vulnerable, provides case studies for understanding how exceptional women navigated patriarchal systems and sometimes transcended their limitations. The parallels between Vestal persecution and modern witch hunts reveal persistent patterns in how societies scapegoat women during times of crisis. The accusation processes, the standards of evidence, the political motivations behind prosecutions, all echo through history in various forms of gender-based persecution. Modern religious communities continue wrestling with questions the Vestals faced. Should spiritual authority require celibacy? How do you balance institutional loyalty with personal conscience? What happens when religious traditions conflict with social evolution? These debates echo concerns that occupied Vestal minds for over a millennium. The preservation of Vestal sites and artifacts raises contemporary questions about cultural heritage, tourism impact, and historical interpretation. How do we present ancient institutions that embody both inspiring and troubling elements? How do we avoid romanticizing or demonizing complex historical realities? The digital age enables new forms of Vestal study through virtual reality experiences, online archives, and global scholarly collaboration. Technology allows modern researchers to explore questions about daily life, social networks, and cultural practices that previous generations couldn't investigate effectively. As you drift towards sleep, consider how the Vestal Virgins embody fundamental human tensions that transcend any particular historical period. The conflict between individual desires and social duties, the price of power and prestige, the search for meaning through service to something greater than oneself. These themes resonate across cultures and centuries. Their story reminds us that even the most privileged lives involve difficult choices and painful sacrifices. The women who kept Rome's eternal flame burning gave up the most basic human experiences to serve their civilization's spiritual needs. Whether their sacrifice was noble, tragic, or something more complex remains a question each generation must answer for itself. In the quiet darkness of your bedroom, with the soft hum of modern life surrounding you, the ancient flames have been extinguished for over 16 centuries. Yet somehow, through the power of historical imagination and scholarly dedication, their light still flickers in human memory, a reminder of extraordinary women who shaped one of history's greatest civilizations while surrendering their own chances for ordinary happiness. The Vestal Virgins achieved a form of immortality that even they might not have expected. Their names are remembered, their stories studied, their choices debated by people they could never have imagined. In the end, perhaps that's the greatest legacy any of us can hope for, to have lived with such purpose and complexity that future generations find meaning in trying to understand our struggles. Sweet dreams, and may your sleep be filled with the gentle wisdom of those who came before us, carrying their torches through darkness so that we might find our own way forward.